Ultimately, they're people making choices. Hi there, it's Dr. Jeanne Reames, and today we're going to talk about Alexander, the human being. And this is a topic that I, in various other videos, have kind of walked around at points. But I want to come back to and look at in a little bit more detail, and was inspired by a different video on YouTube with Heather Cox Richardson. And she had Joanne Freeman on as a guest. And I really like listening to Richardson. If you are interested in American history, if you're interested in American politics, I do recommend her. And I like listening to her, not just because she's another female historian, but we also happen to be about the same age cohort. And every once in a while, she'll throw out a slang term or something that I recognize from my own youth. So it's always fun listening to her, and I like her very sober and structured way of presenting things. But near the end of that video, Freeman said something that made me sit up and kind of take notice. And she's riffing, so there's not any like grammar to it in the way that you would get with reading a quote. But she said, ultimately, they're people making choices. And if we forget that, especially with the revolution and the founder folk, we're always saying we were not special, we're not special. And if you think we're so special, then the narrative of American history is going to be straight downhill because you'll never reach us again. And that's not the way it is. The human factor and the fact that we, the people, are the humans that fundamentally matters in any kind of democratic country, that should be front and center all the time. And I was listening to this and thinking, yes, yes, yes. This is what I want to say about doing Alexander history, that ultimately this is a person making choices. This is a human being. And if we lose sight of that, if we mythologize him to a point that he's not real, then at least for me, he's not interesting. Okay. I am frequently asked, what interested you in Alexander? Why are you doing Alexander? Why did you go get a PhD in this? And that's what it always comes back around to, is these very human elements. This kid is young. Okay, he's young. And one of my frustrations often with whether they're movies or documentaries about him is they always cast him too old. Always. Guys, he was 22. Okay, he was 22 when he crossed from Europe, Greece, and into Asia, Asia Minor. And I've been watching it, speaking of Heather Cox Richardson and the founder folk, I've been watching the Ken Burns documentary on the revolution, which I highly recommend. And I'm thinking, Ken Burns, please, please, come and make one on Alexander, because of the complexity that he injected into the revolution, and how long it goes on in shows, the good side and also the bad side of some of these folks, even Washington, who's another figure that gets mythologized, like Freeman was talking about. And when we lose sight of that, then we lose sight of what we're doing, I suppose, as historians. Alexander, one of the difficulties with making also films and documentaries and writing books about Alexander is you're never going to make everybody happy because Alexander has such a huge range of fans. You have his military history fans. You have, who want him as the military genius. You have business people who want to look at him and use him for business guide in leadership. And then you have the queer community who, of course, wants to see in him a kind of a heroic figure. You've got the Greeks and the northern Macedonians who are having fights over, pulling apart of who gets to use the name and who gets to claim Alexander. You have the romance crowd, and particularly recently, folks interested who liked Madeline Miller's Song of Achilles, and then come to Alexander and want to see Alexander and Hephaestion in that same mode. And over on Tumblr, where I write a fair bit. I was asked not that long ago, does it bother you when people make comparisons between your novel and Madeline Miller's novel? And I'm like, no, but I want to be sure people understand the difference. Okay, Achilles is a fictional character. He's mythologized, and Miller is continuing that at this very lyrical tone, this heroic kind of narrative in some ways, and that's not what I'm interested in at all. Okay, Dancing with the Lion is about Alexander the guy, So the novels I mentioned them periodically. So the first one, Becoming, and the second, Rise, and at the end of Rise, in the author's note, I wrote there that Alexander the Great is arguably the most famous secular figure in history. Okay. His magnetism in life was rivaled only by his magnetism after death. And the story of his career has evoked vastly different interpretations in his age and ours. Young romantic hero or megalomaniacal villain. He's worn both masks. But in the end, whatever view one takes, whatever theories one subscribes to, more or less hostile, we're left with the man himself in all his complexity and contradiction. He was neither a demon nor a god, whatever he wanted to believe about himself. He was a man, capable of cruelty and sympathy, brilliance and blindness, paranoia and an open-handed generosity. As remarkable as he was human. And that's what makes him interesting. So again, Alexander's mythologizing began in his own lifetime with him, and continued on through the Hellenistic kings, his successors. The moment of his death, the successors start manipulating his image. The Romans do. The later historians all have an axe to grind, an Alexander to present. My academic father, meaning the guy who directed my dissertation, not my literal father, Jeanne Borza, in the introduction to the biography of Ulrich Wilcken, said that it is enough to say that there are many Alexanders, perhaps as many as there are those who profess a serious interest in him. And as I said, he's got many, many fans, and so many, many versions. And a lot of them forget the human element, the youth of Alexander, the mistakes that Alexander makes as he goes along. And they try to make it all or nothing. He's terrible, or he's heroic, and he's great. And Alexander the Great. Alexander the human is not as common, I think, although again, for me, that is what is of ultimate interest, and what I keep circling back around to. And when we do history, when we go on the search for Alexander behind these many sources that are often so late, to try to find the man, okay, not the wizard on the screen like the Wizard of Oz, but the man behind the curtain. That's tough. That can be tough. But that's the interesting part. That's the interesting part. And in some ways also the inspiring part. Okay. Just as Freeman was talking about with the founding fathers, founding folk, that if we lose sight of that, if we turn them into heroes, then we forget we can do it too. Okay. And when we look at Alexander and we lose sight that he was just a boy, really, whenever he invaded, I think that actually dismisses some of the magic. Okay, dismisses some of the magic. It's that he's like us. Okay, he's a human being, and that is what makes him interesting.